What's up? What's happening? It's a Friday here on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. It's Friday for you, too. That's the beauty of it. And some of you guys are like, I don't know, I got to work tomorrow. Guess what? It's still Friday. That's how the days work. Just what Friday means. For us, it's the last day, and it means 2 days for all of us until the Commanders take on the Giants at Northwest Field. That's right, Anthony. Their first game at Northwest Field. It's kind of.
You like the name of it?
No. Not as
Okay,
a name. I mean,
okay.
Good for them for getting paid.
You're just being technically correct.
Hey, what am I
about
supposed to do?
what
Am I supposed to call it something else?
No, not at all. Not
At
at all.
the field in Landover. Do like they do for the Olympics where they get rid of the corporate sponsorships?
Yeah.
At Landover Stadium. No. It's called Northwest Field.
Yeah.
They're Northwest Federal Credit Union's paying a lot of money. And if we're not going to call it Northwest Field, we're going to call it the Fed.
Oh yeah, the Fed. Yep.
I did kind of like that. We're going to see if that sticks. That was a J.P. Finley original as far as I know.
You going to the Fed this weekend?
I am going to the Fed this weekend.
I was just making sure I used it correctly. Is that how you use it?
Yeah, although when you say it like that, it sounds like the Feds are coming. It's like you're going to the Fed. It's like, I didn't do anything where the Feds are coming after me. I don't have to go to the Fed. I have to go to the Fed pen, if you will.
Oh,
which is kind of funny. I've never thought about that. We're off to a real Friday start here. But PenFed is the credit union, Pentagon Federal. If you mess it up and then your Fed pen, now you're talking about a federal penitentiary. And that would be bad. So you don't want to get your PenFeds and your Fed pens messed up.
No.
But when we say on this show we're going to the Fed, we have not gotten arrested by the FBI.
Yeah.
We're just merely going to Northwest Field in Landover, Maryland.
Yes, sir.
And there, Anthony, the Washington Commanders will take on the New York Giants. We start the show typically with what's at stake. I'll get into some of the X's and O's preview in a second. Some things that are interesting about this Giants team. And kind of what I'm watching for from the football side of it after watching some of the Giants tape. And 6:30 today, you'll get a deeper dive into that with Logan. Of course, if you're like, I'm not going to be listening at 6:30, Craig, that doesn't do me a whole lot of good. The Take Command podcast is available for you right now with all kinds of stuff previewing this game. But, Anthony, I'm curious what you think. What's at stake for the Commanders this weekend? I have an idea in my head, but sometimes when I have an idea in my head of what I think is at stake, I'm curious to run it by others first and see if my level of importance matches other people. So what do you say in terms of what's at stake this weekend?
So I want to first start off by saying I don't view this as a must-win game. I think a lot of, people on the internet and fans think this is a measuring stick, must-win kind of game, and I just don't see it as that. And history also suggests, when we do view it as such, those games don't really go in our favor. So I want to be more optimistic.
There was that Code Red game one time that started off terribly and turned out to work out.
Well, I mean, there's that one, but all the other ones that have come long since Kirk, not so good. But I think when I look at the game against the Giants, yes, it is a divisional game, and yes, it is a great chance for us to rebound. But I feel as though this is a game where we, correct the things that went wrong in week one. We talked a lot about, this coaching staff coming in, being much better coaches, for our players and things of that nature. And I don't think that was necessarily reflected in the week one performance. And it was the little things like tackling, playing fast, things of that nature. So I think this game is more so just to, correct those wrongs that we had last week and then build off them, to be honest. And I think that'll ultimately, help us end up getting a win against the Giants.
So we're kind of on the same page here in that I think a lot of people are going to say like, oh, this game is like crazy important. You can't start 0-2. And like, obviously I'm not looking to start 0-2. That'd be nice to not start at 0-2. But I do think that it is like, I don't think it's a huge deal if they start 0-2. And I guess I just have such a long view on everything that is kind of where I sit is like, not nothing matters, but it doesn't carry the importance of an 0-2 start in a season where like playoffs are the stated goal from the start. There's just a reality that this is a longer term vision that we're looking at here, and to start 0-2 would suck. And like there's even a point, like some point of this where I'm like, start as bad as possible, get better as the year goes, and then you can have a better draft pick by the end of it, but also finish on the upswing and show improvement. There's like a sick, twisted part of my long-term brain that is like, that is actually the best outcome for this team, is like stack some early losses, dig yourself a hole, have faith that the coaching staff is good enough to get them out of it in the long run, and have you feel encouraged by like weeks 4, 5, 6, 7, winning games. Not that they're going to start 0-6, but like start winning some games more consistently in the back half of the season. But you did enough damage to your record to not be stuck with the 15th pick, and you have the ninth or 10th pick in next year's draft, and that's actually better for the rebuild in the long term. So there is like a little bit of that, where it's not that in order to have given up on the season already, I would have had to have expectations. I'm willing to be pleasantly surprised, have them go out and beat the Giants, go beat the Bengals on Monday night if they're struggling, and the Commanders figure some stuff out. And maybe that Tampa game was just the wake-up call they needed, and, hey, they go on a run and they're competitive in the NFC East. Like, that would be awesome. That, for my selfish purposes, be as good as possible, Washington. Please, by all means, be our guest. Go be competitive. But I think realistically, I just kind of go into each game this week looking at it at its own thing. What's at stake? A step in the rebuild, a step in the recalibration, a step in the ability for Dan Quinn to show that he can get a team turned around, that Joe Witt Jr. can coordinate a defense, that Cliff Kingsbury can call good plays, that Jaden Daniels can continue to learn and grow, that if you want to use Dan's words, right, you take the lessons that were available to you last week in the game that everyone had to learn, and you learn them this week. I know there's a lot of, there's both a competitor's mentality that if you're a player, that ironically matches up with, I think, a lot of fans' mentality here, that like it's a game, what's at stake is a win. You played, Herm Edwards is on line one. You play to win the games. But I do think that where they are right now, and what we saw week one, realistically, with the kind of the talent gap, if you will, the talent like hole they were digging out of, and seeing like some of the areas where they might struggle more than we even thought, that I'm willing to just be like, make it better, whatever better means. Now, I will say the Giants being a bad football team certainly means you can be not that much better, and you're not going to have Daniel Jones likely do what Baker Mayfield did to you last week. You're not going to have any of their receivers do what Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were able to do. Andrew Thomas is actually pretty good at left tackle. He's not Tristan Wirfs, but the rest of their line is not very good. Definitely way better than it was last year, but that line in Tampa is really good. And so it's just a different kind of challenge. And then schematically, like, Liam Cohen was in his bag last week, the Tampa OC, and Todd Bowles was in his bag. Shane Bowen's bag as the DC for New York is not. It's not. I want to say, like, he's not a bad DC. It's just not nearly as complicated. It's not as deep of a bag as Bowles has. Now, will they try some of the stuff, try to install it? Yes, but like when you've been practicing it all camp and it's who you are, and you're like the Todd Bowles team doing the Todd Bowles stuff, it's different than the Shane Bowen team trying to do some of the Todd Bowles stuff. So even if they try to mix it up a little bit, I don't think it'll be nearly as sharp. And then on the other side, like Kafka and Dayball, they can ball. Like, those two dudes are really good, but I don't think they know who they are offensively right now. I don't think they have an identity based off what happened last week. Their offense looked clunky as hell. So I'm optimistic that a solid performance can produce a win. I'm very optimistic that they're going to compete this week. I'm hoping that it is not just a dog dookie, terrible football game that we've had so many Commanders-Giants games be over the last 5 years. But realistically, if it is, and all the bad stuff is bad again, then the long-term project, it doesn't really deter me over 2 weeks. It's going to have to be a lot longer than that before I'm like, yeah, these guys really aren't up to all the talk that they say. At the end of the day, like, 2 games is 2 games. I know it's a larger chunk. It's not like you're playing 2 of 162 in a baseball season, but it still is just 2 games. And once you don't care as much about the record, saying it's just 2 games becomes, I think, a lot easier. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And when we get back, let's dive into the matchup and why there's one particular New York Giant who could make things very, very difficult for Jaden Daniels on Sunday. Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always alive as well on the free Odyssey app. Ready for Week 2 Commanders and Giants. We'll preview it with the Giants Insider coming up at 5 o'clock. Of course, we'll go around the NFL at 5:30 as well. But there's a couple of Giants who are, talented, but frankly not very productive NFL players who turn into absolute monsters against the Burgundy and Gold. We'll talk about them in about 5 minutes, but I want to start off talking about one player who has been an absolute monster against everybody. And that player, Anthony, is Sexy Dexy, the big fella, big old 97. Dexter Lawrence. It is kind of a rude awakening to being a Washington Commander for Tyler Biadasz. It's not anything specific to Washington. I just imagine him, signing his contract, being really excited. He's like, yeah, I'm going to go play for DQ. Like, really like DQ. I loved practicing against him. His intensity is fire. He probably had a relationship with Dan. That's the kind of guy Dan was. I'm sure he had relationships with offensive players. And a center is a really valuable guy to have a good relationship with if you're a DC. Talk about protections, talk about things that he's looking at, get his perspective on the game. And he comes and he's like, all right, let's I wonder what this schedule is going to look like. Oh, cool. Week 1, Tampa. A 3-4 with a nasty nose guard and Vita Vea. Okay, that sucks. Week 2. Wait, we're playing another 3-4 team? I got Dexter Lawrence. Who did I hurt? Who's trying to hurt me? Because they might be the best two pure nose tackles in the league. And the challenges that they present are incredibly difficult. But despite playing the same position, they do present things slightly differently. Last week with Vea, you've got a guy who is, one, he's bigger than Lawrence. Not that there's a lot of human beings walking around who are, but he is definitively one of them. He is a monstrous mountain of a man who is also supremely quick and strong and powerful and twitchy, and he also moves around quite a bit. So he might start heads up on you, helmet to helmet, in that true zero, nose guard position. And then right at the snap, he jumps to a shade. So now he's on your shoulder. Or he might jump over a full gap and be, over towards the guard. He is going to stunt and twist, and they're going to do all this stuff. The good news for Tyler Biadasz and to an extent Sam Cosmi and Nick Allegretti is that Dexter Lawrence is going to be pretty straight up on as a nose guard. He's just going to be there unless they're in 4-down fronts, in which case he will be, in that one technique, probably maybe playing some 3 techniques. So he'll either be between kind of the center and the guard or between the guard and the tackle. But either way, like he's there. You block him straight up. The problem is doing that sucks. And for a team that wants to have some presence running the football vertically up the middle of the field and also wants to make sure that they're in positive down and distance, like not being able to reliably get even 3 yards to be in 2nd and 7 is a detriment to the offense. And so figuring out for Cliff Kingsbury how to consistently make sure that they're in good down and distance, to make sure that the pass rush isn't able to get after Jaden Daniels, to make sure that you're in good rushing situations, to make sure you're in situations where your play action game is available to you. Because if you're in 2nd and 14, that play action is not going to be super effective. Teams don't care if you get to 3rd and 11, even 3rd and 10. They do care if you're in 3rd and 3. So if you rush for 3 yards on 1st down and you're in 2nd and 7, and the threat of a 4-yard carry gets you to 3rd and 3, that is going to be more effective in terms of the pull on the linebackers, the safeties, and trying to hit some kind of bigger shot, open up a little bit bigger window off the play action game. But Dexter Lawrence can make it so you're 2nd and 9, and now all of a sudden you're 2nd and long, and you're in a bad way. He can also make it so you're in 2nd and 11 because he gives you a tackle for loss in the backfield. So poor Tyler Biadasz last week. As a center, you just don't see that many nose guards line up right across from you. Last week, he's got Vita Vea. This week, he's got Dexter Lawrence. Earning his money, that's for sure. But Dexter Lawrence is awesome against everyone. The question is, in this new defense for Shane Bowen, how good can Kayvon Thibodeau be? And Kayvon Thibodeau has been an absolute nightmare for the Washington Commanders and basically no one else. He has 15.5 career sacks total. 5.5 of those are against the Commanders in 4 games alone, including the 2 games last season. That's it. I mean, he's what, like a 3rd-year player. So it's his career against the Commanders is the 2 games each year, 5.5 sacks over those 4 games. And I'm pretty sure, like, of the other 10.5 sacks, like 10 of them, or of the other 10 sacks, like 9 or 10 of them are against like 3rd-string tackles. He doesn't beat starting tackles unless they were named Charles Leno for the Washington Commanders the last 2 years. Now, some of those were not Leno's fault. Some of those were Wink Martindale had an absolute field day against Scott Turner and Eric Bieniemy. They just were not ready for the quasi unsound blitzes that Wink Martindale brings. Wink is more all in than anybody that's ever coordinated defense in the NFL. He will leave his back end exposed. He will leave his secondary players on islands. He will leave guys, it feels like, just wide open in the name of let's get after the passer and hope that the blitz gets home and the quarterback can't figure out where the open guy is. And that is not how Shane Bowen operates. So some of those sacks for Kayvon Thibodeau came from, hey, Sam Howell slides the protection the wrong way. Thibodeau's unblocked, and all he's got to do is run straight to Sam Howell and tackle him. That kind of stuff is probably not going to be available this week for Kayvon Thibodeau. So can he actually line up against Brandon Coleman and Cornelius Lucas and beat those guys one-on-one? That, or, Andrew Wiley on the other side. Because now you have Brian Burns in the fold as well, who's actually kind of a similar rusher, better version, but great athlete, not the most polished rusher. But you do have to account for those guys. Obviously, Lawrence inside. Their linebackers are really, really good in Okereke and oh God, I'm forgetting the other starting linebacker, but he's good. Micah McFadden, I think. Anthony, yes, no, yes,
yes.
Anthony's
McFadden is one.
The head
yes.
nod. Yeah. So they're talented up front. They're not as talented in the back end. They're young. They're scrappy. Deontay Banks is a solid player. I am low-key excited. This might be my low-key storyline of the week, Anthony. Remember last year, Deontay Banks and Terry McLaurin were talking quite a bit? Like Banks was yapping.
Mm-hmm.
And Terry was basically like, if I ever get a quarterback, I'm going to murder you.
Pretty much. Yeah, that's sort of kind of how it went.
Well, I think Terry's got a better quarterback now. He's a rookie.
Uh-oh.
We'll see. But Jaden seems like the kind of guy that if Terry goes, Jaden, bleep the play call. I don't think Terry would do this. But Terry looks at Jaden and goes, bleep the play call. I would like you to just throw me the freaking deep ball. Like, make sure the safety's not going to clean my clock. If it's single high, I'm going deep. Screw the play. Throw me the ball. I'm going to moss this guy. I'm going to end his life. I think Jaden will throw it. And by the way, Cliff is going to probably dial up some shots. They're going to test them. And so it's going to be fun to watch that matchup. But the other guy, obviously, that I'm talking about earlier in the segment that has been just a different human being when he faces the Commanders and the rest of the league is Daniel Jones, who is 5-1-1 against the Commanders, 10 TDs, 3 interceptions, completing almost 70% of his passes. This is for a guy whose completion percentage last week was in the 50s in week 1. Here's going to be my question kind of this week on that side of the ball, and we can get into some of the matchup stuff later. Obviously, how this offense is going with Malik Neighbors, without Saquon Barkley, how it looks a little bit different this year. Some of the key guys to watch out for an offense that was pretty dead in week 1 and why it was so dead. But for as good as Daniel Jones has been against the Commanders, he's been poopsie against the Cowboys. Been awful. And remember, last year they won the 2 games, like 89-17 combined scores. So one question I'm going to ask Ryan Dunleavy, who's a Giants insider, is going to join us coming up at 5 o'clock, is around, Florham Park, I believe is their version of Ashburn, around the Giants building this week. Has the talk of the offense been more, we're facing the Commanders and Daniel Jones might turn into Commander Daniel? Or are we facing a Dan Quinn defense where this has gone very, 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 very poorly in the past? Clearly, hopefully, Washington can benefit from Quinn's experience and Joe Witt's experience. Obviously, it would help if you had like Micah Parsons and Trayvon Diggs and some of the personnel they had. But that is kind of the key question on the Jones front going into the game. More preview as we go here on the Hoffman Show. Coming up next, let's do this. We're still tinkering around with our Finish Friday. We finish our week by making predictions. We do it at 5:30. Let's have you guys make some for Finish Friday next because, last week's Finish Friday, we didn't like that version.
Yeah.
And it didn't work
got
on
off to a
Sunday.
rough start.
It didn't work on Sunday. It kind of went like the Commanders' attempt to finish on Sunday. Bad news bears. So who you got in the game and why? 301-230-0980. This is much more straightforward. We're finishing Friday with predictions. Ours coming up later in the show. Yours next, 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live as well on the free Odyssey app. One 230-0980 is the number on a finished Friday here on the Hoffman Show. Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Your predictions for the game here to finish the week. You can give them to us at that number, 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. And then we will also, this segment, depending on how many calls we get here, possibly talk about the Tua Tagovailoa situation last night in Thursday Night Football. Good note. By the way, Anthony, real quick before we get to the phones, a note from Chief Editorial Officer Chris Russell. FYI, DJ Hurts for second meeting last year, and outside of Sunday Night Football Week 1 last year, his numbers are not bad versus DQ. Not bad. So, my bad. My bad on that. On Daniel. How dare I besmirch the great name of Daniel Jones? That sounded way more sarcastic than I wanted it to be. Now I want to look up Daniel Jones' career numbers against the Cowboys.
He plays well against the Cowboys?
Let's see. Daniel Jones' career record against the Cowboys is 1-7.
Nice.
He got there. When did Quinn get there? 2021. He was okay in let's see. He went 17 in 2021. He went. Oh, sorry. No, we want this 2021. He was 5 of 13 for 98 yards. Looks like he might have gotten knocked out of this game. So that's not great. Then he went 20 of 37, which is a 54% completion percentage for 196 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 1 interception. That's not a very good outing in 2022. And the second outing in 2022, he went a better 21 of 35 for 228 and 1 touchdown. And then Sunday Night Football to open 2023, he was certifiably booty. 15 of 28 for 104 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 2 picks. I'm going to say I was right the first time. I feel good about that. He's never beaten Dan Quinn. The end of the 2020 season was his only win against the Cowboys, and that was before DQ got there. So he's 0-4 against Dan Quinn. Chris, I know you're listening. What are you talking about? Those numbers aren't good. Oh, Anthony's on the phone. Russell didn't call in, did he? No, we got people with predictions. Okay. No Russell calling in.
Chris Russell did not call in. I was getting my man Casey right.
Okay. We'll get to Casey in a second, but he was the second person to call in, and we tried to go in order out of fairness. We'll see if Chris Russell does call in to argue with me, as I have the numbers right in front of me and just read them to everybody. But yes, Daniel Jones was only responsible for one of the 2 40-point losses the Giants had to the Cowboys last year. That is correct. Finish Friday here. We get your predictions, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Let's go to Doug in Richmond. Doug, thanks for calling. Who you got in the game and why?
Appreciate it, man. Greg, just got off of work, so it's great to have a little conversation with you. I got us winning and a nail biter, 21-17. I just think I believe more in this coaching staff. I want to see the defense get better week to week because they talk about finishing, they talk about taking an extra step to get it instead of lunging at guys. So hopefully that works. And I guess against the lesser competition, that's good. And then on the offensive side, it's a more simplistic defense, so I think Jaden can go kill it.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly the hope. Thanks, Doug, for the call. That's certainly the hope, I think, is that you can get, a much simpler defense that's not only going to help Jaden see and be able to make some of the throws that he may have passed up last week, but that he can, have better protection and some of the other issues that kind of popped up last week for the whole offense are a little easier to navigate. All right, let's go to Casey. Casey, thanks for calling on a Finish Friday. Who you got in the game and why?
What's up, Hoffman? I got the Redskins winning 24-17. The reason why, I believe the Giants' secondary is horrible. Another thing, if Malik Neighbors doesn't play, it'll be much easier. If Forbes is out, but still, Malik Neighbors, if he's out, it should be much easier. The Giants' running game is horrible. Should be able to stop it. The only thing it falls on is Jaden Daniels to cook.
Sorry, what was the last thing you said?
I said it just leads to I believe Jaden Daniels will cook this Sunday. It's a kind of
he'll cook. Yeah. Casey,
Yeah,
thanks for the call.
One with Iffy.
Yeah, thanks for the call, man. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's a possibility. Not having is obviously Bucky Irving killed them last week, so the lack of a what seems to be like the lack of a running game, definitely not ideal for the Giants side of things. But for Washington, they have less to worry about schematically. They have less to worry about talent-wise, and so if they can just raise their performance a little bit, then that should be enough to win, you hope, based off who the Giants are. Okay, forget all that. Chris Russell has called in to defend himself. He says that I am besmirching Daniel Jones' name despite the fact that he's 0-4 career against Dan Quinn. Russell, what do you have to say for yourself?
Hi, Craig. How are you?
I'm good, Chris.
So I want to point out, I didn't say he was good. I said he was not bad outside of that Sunday night football disaster week 1. And you just read some of the numbers, and I'm not going to tell you again that he was good. What I will say is in that first matchup in 2022 against Dan Quinn and the Cowboys, he wasn't great passing, as you pointed out, 20 of 37, but I think he had 1 touchdown, no interceptions, if memory serves me, but he had a pretty big rushing day. And then the Thanksgiving Day loss in Dallas, I thought he played pretty well from what I remember about that game, and I think statistically that bears fruit. He missed 2 of the 6 matchups with the Cowboys while Dan Quinn was the defensive coordinator, which has been Daniel Jones, quite honestly, his biggest problem is he hasn't been able to stay healthy. He hasn't been able to stay on the field, so – and I don't think he's healthy right now. I think we're asking a lot out of Daniel Jones to be like 100%, to be ready and to be running around against blitzing aggressive defenses like Brian Flores and Minnesota when he's a half a year removed from a torn ACL.
I think that's totally fair. I am looking at all of the games, and okay. There's the one game where the Cowboys won 23-16 in September of 22, where Daniel Jones, to your credit, did have 79 yards rushing. Was that the game that he had the really long carry and then fell at the end?
I don't think so. I thought that was against Philadelphia on like a primetime game.
It might have been. I know it was a divisional game and it wasn't against Washington, but that is obviously the quintessential Daniel Jones play. Oh, look at the talent. Look at him literally falling short. No.
Listen, I want to be clear. I am not arguing that Daniel Jones is good enough. I was surprised because the narrative in my mind was that Sunday night game, week 1 last year. Oh, he's been terrible against EQ and Dallas. Terrible, awful. Just dreadful. And then you look in the numbers and you're like, oh, yeah, I remember that Thanksgiving Day game where, the Giants lost, but they actually played reasonably well, and he played reasonably well in his one really good year in the NFL.
Right. And I do think your point, Chris, that's probably more important than any kind of past history is what is he currently right now? Like, he's not fully – 100% of Daniel Jones is only so good, and he's not 100% of Daniel Jones. So
that is a great way to say it. That's why you are the wordsmith that you are.
Why, thank you, kind sir. Hey, I appreciate you listening to the show as always and having a little fun with us here on a Friday. Have a great weekend, buddy. And will I see you in the press box?
Yes, unfortunately for you.
I will see you on Sunday, and I will be there in time to protect my seat. I will not be late this year because I'm not doing pregame anymore. Denton and Linnell have it handled. So I will be there. I will be there early. No nachos in my seat, please.
I'll try not to spill any cheese sauce this year.
Thank you. I very much appreciate it. Chris Russell, everybody, a gentleman and a scholar. Thank you. Oh, he's gone. Okay. Daniel Jones. I think it's yes, Anthony. What would you like to add?
Was that the game I think you went to where he spilled the nachos?
Well, I went to most home games last year, if not almost all of them, and there was for those that don't know the story, we don't need any more Daniel Jones analysis. We've lost the thread. It's fine. This is funnier anyway. So we last year when we did the Take Command pregame show, and again Denton and Linnell got you covered pregame this year. I'm actually going to join the guys somewhere in the final hour of the pregame. I think either noon or 12:15 on Sunday from Northwest Field, but. We at 12:30, so like near the very end, we're getting closer to kickoff. we'd always have Grant or Danny on. We kind of rotated through a lot of folks on the station. We had, the Junkies did some stuff for us. Sheehan joined us earlier in the show, and then we rotated Grant and Danny at the 12:30 spot. And when we always did Grant for home games because Grant was also at the games in the press box. And we were doing some bits with Grant about Russell, and as the call is ending, as we have Grant live on the phone, Logan and I are doing the pregame. Grant's like, oh my God, Russell just I'm pretty sure it was while he was on the phone, or maybe it was right after we hung up. He's like, Russell just spilled nachos all over your chair. And sure enough, they got pictures, and there was a picture that hung up in the studio for a while.
Yep.
That Essig blew up and put there because that is the most Matt Essig thing that has ever happened. And then, when I got there, luckily it had been mostly cleaned up. You could kind of see a little bit of a stain on the carpet, on the floor. It wasn't Chris's best moment, perhaps, but he's had plenty of great ones.
Yeah.
God bless Chris Russell. God bless Chris Russell.
Yeah, I have just one memory of Chris Russell, and I'm not sure who he was working for at that. I mean, I think he was he's working here, but he was also working while at the game.
Oh,
and he just in the studio. I mean, he's in the booth.
Oh, yeah, he does
the
updates for, it used to be CBS, now Infinity Sports Network. And, he's Chris Russell's volume knob got broken and stuck on high somewhere in 1998. And so, imagine sitting right next to him when all of a sudden he's like, yeah, Zach, blah, 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 blah. And we're all like, whoa, okay, we're awake. We're up. It's a good time. We have a lot of fun. It's a press box full of bits. It's a good time, but we're all also there working, trying to have fun, watching what has been some disastrous football the past bunch of years, but hopefully we get a much better product. Maybe we'll be a little more serious if the product is good on Sunday. Probably not, but maybe. You're not coming to the press box on Sunday, are you?
No, I like to watch the game from home.
Okay.
Yeah, but I will make my way down to the press box once or twice, but I prefer to watch it at home.
Okay. I'll be there.
I got some meal prepping I got to do.
Gotta get that done.
Very important.
Yeah, no, I will be there, and then as soon as all the post game locker room access is done, Logan and I will do our Take Command post game show from the stadium like we did last year, so folks can be on the lookout for that. When we get back here on the Hoffman Show, we will preview the other big sporting event for the weekend. There's actually kind of a series, if you will, starts tonight, and you'll hear it here part of it here on the Team 980. Then back to Commanders Giants coming up at 5 p.m. get back to Commanders Giants with a Giants insider. Ryan Dunleavy joins us coming up at 5 p.m., just about 10 minutes from right now. But could the Washington Mystics be in control of their own playoff destiny by the end of the night? The answer, very simply, is yes. Tonight, the Mystics take on the Atlanta Dream. They will play again, actually, on Sunday. But let's just get to tonight first and set the stage for this huge matchup. Now, unfortunately, this game will not be here on the Team 980 because it's an Ion game. But there is plenty of WNBA action tonight to keep track of if you want to lock in, fire up the old multi-view. League Pass, League Pass is like $12 or something ridiculous for like the whole year, Anthony. If you could probably buy League Pass for like $5 for tonight and it'd be worth it. I don't even know how it works though because the games are on Ion, and so typically it's regional coverage. I don't know how you watch all the games tonight, but worth figuring it out. If at the very least find yourself a scoreboard situation, watch the Mystics on Ion because that game will be on here in the DC market, and keep an eye on Minnesota and Chicago because. Very simply, Anthony, if Minnesota, who's one of the best teams in the league, beats Chicago, who's coming off getting absolutely dump trucked by the Mystics on Wednesday, if that happens, Minnesota beats Chicago, the winner of Atlanta and Washington is tied for the 8th seed. Both teams currently one game back of Chicago for that 8th and final playoff spot. And then, if that doesn't get any better for both, frankly, Washington and Atlanta, Chicago's got Phoenix, who's also ahead of them in the standings and a better team, on Sunday, while Washington and Atlanta play again. So, by the time we reconvene on Monday, there is a chance that the Mystics, if they can sweep the Dream and Chicago goes 0 for 2 against teams that are better than them, the Mystics would hold that playoff spot on their own with a one-game lead entering the final 2 games of the season.
It's crazy, man, considering like where we've come from. But I guess it's not all that crazy just because you look at a team like the Indiana Fever who got off to like a
terrible start.
Yeah, a super terrible start. And now they're like, one of the better teams, hotter teams in the league. So I think it just speaks to, the season just being a long season. And, Washington, again, like we had a whole bunch of injuries to, deal with. And we've done all season long was, battle. And, I mean, that's all you can really, like, ask for, to be honest, like, just to go out there and compete. But it's crazy, man. It is crazy. And it's funny how, the end of the season even played out like this. I think you mentioned it yesterday, how, all three of these teams, the Sky, the Dream, the Washington, are all playing one another.
It's like this crazy round robin to end the season. Because when Atlanta's finally done with Washington on this back-to-back Friday, Sunday, of course, they then get Chicago. So there's plenty of other good teams on these schedules because, like, it's not like, oh, sweet, if the Mystics can just get through this weekend. Well, then they've got the Liberty and the Fever to close out. So they could get this lead and then very easily give it right back up while Chicago and Atlanta play each other in that third game, and then they've all got, they all finish against other teams. And for Washington, again, it's Indiana. That game's next, it's the 17th. I think it's Wednesday or Thursday, whatever day the 17th is. Or is that the 19th?
Or is it?
I think it's the 17th.
I think they play.
No, I think you're right. I think it's the 19th. I think the Liberty's
next
on the
Thursday.
17th.
Next Thursday, they
Thursday,
play the Fever.
Next Thursday, and that game's at Capital One.
Yes, sir.
So that should be fun. We might, if the playoffs are on the line, Ant, I think we might do the show from there that day. So TBD on that. We'll check out what happens over the next couple of days and check with the boss man and with the sticks on that. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild to think that this team is here, considering they were the last team to get a win. They've had so many injuries all year, and they've just kept fighting. And we talked with Brittany Sykes about it yesterday on the show. If you missed that towards the end of the program, definitely worth a listen. Slim is a fantastic interview, and she joined the show talking about these matchups and talking about how they've just stayed the course at 6:30 yesterday. So you can check that out in the Hoffman Show podcast feed, or we put our women's sports content at Hoffman W Sports on YouTube for all the on-demand stuff. But this Atlanta team's good, but they're also incredibly inconsistent. They're led by a young star and an aging star, Tina Charles, who is a former MVP, is still really, really talented, and she's kind of their stalwart in the middle. But they've also got Ryan Howard, who's a young star in the league, multi-time All-Star, 3x3 Olympic medalist. She's a fantastic, shot creator and scorer, and obviously Brittany's got that matchup tonight, and we'll see if she can limit Ryan. Like, how does everyone else do? Can you, and then like, where's the scoring come from, which has been kind of the thing this year. Sometimes Washington's got it and they can put up huge point totals. Other times it isn't there, because their defense, I feel like, has been far more consistent and obviously really, really good. Like, it's even been solid when Brittany's not out there, but Brittany Sykes, who might be the best individual defender in the league, when she's out there, it goes to a different level. So going to be fun to watch tonight. Of course, I won't actually have the chance to watch it live because I'll be at another game that's at 7:30 tonight. I'm still in Indianapolis for Fever and Aces, so I will be in the building tonight seeing if Caitlin Clark and company can get revenge after the Aces beat them on Wednesday. Of course, also on the line tonight, probably not tonight, but who knows, with A'ja Wilson. A'ja Wilson, 50 points shy of becoming the first ever WNBA player to score 1,000 points in a season. So how close can she get? Let's mess around and find out. She had a big night the other night, so it's going to be fun to see that one tonight. It's a huge, actually, night in the W. Tons of games on the schedule. Mystic Streams, Aces Fever, Storm Wings, all at 7:30, as is Sky Lynx, and then Sun Mercury wrap it up at 10. And again, if that's not enough for you, Sunday, Dream Mystics again at 3 o'clock. So fire up your second screen if you're watching Commanders Giants. Flip that on, and, depending on what happens tonight in Chicago, that game could be to have a lead for that 8th and final playoff spot in the WNBA. When we get back to Commanders and Giants, though. We'll be joined by Ryan Dunleavy, Giants insider, for Not My Beat here on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And we are streaming live on YouTube if you like as well at the Team 980. We go around the NFL at 5:30, but right now it is time for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
Joining us today to talk about Commanders and Giants is Ryan Dunleavy of the New York Post. Ryan, what's up, man? How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing quite well. Of course, looking forward to Sunday. And I'm curious, on the Daniel Jones front, a couple of different things. First of all, has the talk in New York this week been remotely about Jones's history, either with the Commanders or against Dan Quinn? And if so, is it one versus the other? Because he's 5-1-1 against the Commanders, but has struggled, including one of the worst games of his career, the Sunday night opener last year, last time he faced a Dan Quinn-led defense.
Yes, the answer to your question is both. There's been a lot of talk about both. Like, the narrative around Daniel Jones, obviously, is how much longer he can hold his grip on the starting quarterback job here. Everybody saw publicly on Hard Knocks that the Giants were interested in replacing him. They did not. There's an injury guarantee in his contract that suggests if he doesn't play well soon, they're going to have a Russell Wilson situation on their hand. So it's a ticking clock, and the idea is if you're playing for your job, the team you want to play is the Washington Commanders, who you're 5-1-1 against. He only has 22 wins in his career. 5 of them are against Washington. He only has 62 touchdown passes in his career. 10 are against Washington. It's the one team he's figured out. And then, to your point, they now have this ain't Ron Rivera's Washington team. This is Dan Quinn's Washington team, and Dan Quinn has had Daniel Jones's number. I think he has 15 sacks in 4 games against Daniel Jones. They're 0-4, Daniel Jones was. But the real caveat there, guys, is Dan Quinn doesn't have the Cowboys personnel. So it's Jones versus Quinn, Jones versus the Commanders, but it's really Jones versus the Commanders personnel, and I think the Commanders personnel is more friendly to Jones than the Cowboys personnel ever was.
Yeah, certainly not having Micah Parsons makes it much friendlier, not to mention some of the other talented guys down there in Dallas that Dan could not bring with him to D.C. What has been, if there is a theme against the Cowboys in those Daniel Jones versus Dan Quinn matchups, is it individual dominance and brilliance by a guy like Parsons, or has it been more an inability to schematically figure out what's going on and make good decisions, read defenses, figure out where pressure is coming from, those types of more coach adjacent things from Daniel Jones?
Good question. It's been the common theme has been that he's running for his life. And so whether that is the coach creating the pressure or Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence, who's a Giants tormentor over the years, getting pressure, whether it's the fact that Evan Neal was at right tackle for the last 2 years and is not anymore because he lost the job. Daniel Jones has been running for his life against the Cowboys. The Cowboys always get up big on the Giants, so then they're forced to play the drop-back pass game, and that doesn't work well. The Giants-Commanders games are obviously usually much closer, and you can have a more balanced offensive game plan. So the one thing more than anything is that Dan Quinn's aggressive defense has had Daniel Jones running for his life. And the Giants have upgraded their offensive line, certainly with the Cowboys and by extension Dan Quinn in mind, because those games just got out of hand because the Giants offensive line just couldn't do it.
You mentioned the injury guarantee. Ryan Dunleavy, Giants reporter for the New York Post, is with us here on the Hoffman Show for Not My Beat today. You mentioned the injury guarantee, and you mentioned, what we all saw on Hard Knocks, and at times kind of the push and pull between Joe Shane and obviously the team president. What kind of power does each have here? I guess really the crux of the question, Ryan, would be do you think Joe Shane will actually be able to override the very few people in that Giants organization that are above him up to the ownership level to tell Brian Daboll, if it comes to it, hey, Daniel Jones is not playing anymore because we can't risk him getting hurt because we are moving on after this season?
I don't think he has to tell Brian Dable. I mean, I think they're lockstep on everything. I mean, they came here together. They came from Buffalo together. If Joe Shane's thinking he wants to pull the plug, then Brian Dable is thinking it, and vice versa. So they share a brain on football decisions. So about telling the upper hand, look, I think we saw on Hard Knocks that Joe Shane and Brian Dable have complete football control of this organization, for better or worse. And, John Mara wanted Saquon Barkley back, and Saquon Barkley just scored 3 touchdowns for the Eagles in week 1. So John Mara shares his opinion. He's not the typical football owner who was a billionaire somewhere else and bought a football team. He is a football guy through and through. It's what he grew up in. It's the family business. So he has educated scouting personnel opinions, but he does defer to his leadership. So I do think he'd let it be known what he thinks. But in the end, it'll be Shane and Dayball's decision on when to pull it. But let's call what it is, guys. I mean, the Giants are hoping to be 2-0. They're staring at 0-2. And then the next 5 games are a brutal gauntlet. So this is a must-win game for the Giants. If not, they're looking at Cleveland, then Dallas, then I don't know. There's put it this way: the next 5 games are all against teams that you could expect to be in the playoffs at the end of the year. So if they don't win this game, they could be 0-7, 0-8 real quick.
Oof, that is not ideal. Then again, that is the nature of being a bad team in the NFL. Your losses tend to stack up quickly, and the Giants certainly look that part so far. Last Daniel Jones question for you, Ryan, would be this. 100% of Daniel Jones is only so good, but he's also coming off the ACL. What percent of Daniel Jones do you think we saw in week 1, and realistically, is that the percent we should expect to see in week 2?
That's a good question. I don't know how I could put a percentage on it. I would say this, physically he's fine. I watched him in training camp 90% of the time. I know what he looks like at his best. I think physically he's fine. Maybe he doesn't have some of the same running explosion, which is a big deal to him because that's what keeps defenses honest. That's a big part of his game. People don't always think that because, there's a famous clip of him stumbling or whatever, and because he might not look like Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, but running is a big part of Daniel Jones's game. It's a strength. And a defensive coach told me this week he doesn't quite look like he has the same explosion, but physically I feel he's fine. Mentally, it's where he's beat up, and he's nowhere near what he was in 2022. Inside the building, they'll tell you he hasn't lost any confidence. Anybody of his former teammates, Kyle Rudolph, Golden Tate, or any quarterback who's played the position and is now a media analyst will tell you he's exhibiting all the signs of a quarterback who doesn't have any confidence. He's rushing his throws. He's abandoning the pocket. He's not trusting what he sees. So mentally, he's far off from where he's been at his best. But physically, I think he's okay.
Yeah, you can definitely see it on tape when you watch him. He's a little late. He's a little off. His throws are unsure. With that, from a supporting cast standpoint, Malik Neighbors obviously comes in. We saw at LSU what he could do. Obviously, a lot of us that watched a lot of Jaden Daniels tape saw the ball leave Jaden's hand and land in Malik Neighbors. We saw how much it meant to Shane and them via Hard Knocks to get him. Is there anyone else, though, that really can move the needle for this Giants offense with Barkley having departed to Philly, as is well documented and mentioned? But is there anyone else that, if you're game planning against this Giants offense, that you think Joey Jr. and Dan Quinn are really circling?
I mean, they should be familiar with Darius Slayton. He's led the Giants in receiving yards for 4 of the last 5 years. He's coming out of the concussion protocol. He's a big play threat. He's Daniel's most comfortable target. He's not by any world a game breaker or whatnot, in the world of the league, but he's a consistent receiver who would be pushing 1,000 yards in better offenses over the last 4 or 5 years. He's just as steady as they come. And then Wan'Dale Robinson had 12 targets for the Giants in week 1. They use him essentially as an extension of the running game. Everything's within a 5-yard cushion. Try to get him and scheme him into space and let him get yards after the catch. But no, there's not anybody on the Darren Waller, Saquon Barkley level, 2 guys who were here last year and are gone, who other than Malik Neighbors.
Ryan Dunleavy, New York Post, with us here on the Hoffman Show, previewing the Washington Commanders game against the New York Giants on Sunday. On the other side of the ball, Kayvon Thibodeau is kind of the Daniel Jones of the Giants defense in that he hasn't been particularly good against anybody else, that's not like third stringers or the Washington Commanders. How has he looked so far through camp with Brian Burns on the other side and this new Shane Bowen defense? And how much is he looking forward to seeing colors that he has thrived against on Sunday?
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I haven't quite made that. But, yeah, he had that memorable game in 2022, which is probably the most dominant game I've seen a Giants player have on the defensive side in like a decade. He had like 12 sacks, a strip sack for 12 tackles, strip sack fumble for a touchdown, and then he stopped a touchdown at like the 1 yard line. And I think Washington didn't score on the drive. So, yeah, he's certainly had Washington's number 2. I wouldn't say quite that he hasn't had success against anybody else. He did have an 11.5 sack season last year, but he had a very quiet opener, and he didn't respond well to having a very quiet opener when asked about it. So, no, I mean, look, the Giants' defense is the opposite of the Giants' defense the last 2 years. Under Wink Martindale, it was blitz heavy, pressure, aggressive, man coverage. This is more zone coverage and rely on your front four to get after the quarterback. Your best players have to play well, is how Bowen put it, and Thibodeau, and you have to play well where your resources are, he said. And Thibodeau is the former number 5 pick in the draft. Brian Burns has a $30 million a year contract. So they need those two players to dominate Washington's journeyman offensive tackles.
Yeah, or a third-round rookie who is going to rotate in there as well, and Brandon Coleman. Either way, when you put it that way, that seems like advantage. New York, I know that there has been a bunch of injuries that you've been following, obviously, all week. The Malik Neighbors thing seems like it was nothing more than, a brief thing. He's not even on the injury report by Friday. But what's the status of Micah McFadden, and how important is he to that Giants defense?
Yeah, I mean, Neighbors isn't on the injury report because he's going to play, and he was a full participant in practice. But he limped around a little bit at practice today. I mean, they need him, so he's going to play, and one of his things is durability. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's not at full strength. And then Micah McFadden is important when they're in a base defense. Like the Giants will probably play a lot. It depends on the personnel they're going against, but they're very comfortable to sit nickel and dime, in which case McFadden wouldn't be on the field. Isaiah Simmons, a big linebacker, hybrid defensive back who didn't play any snaps against the Vikings, could be on the field in that spot. But if they're in their base defense, he's their second best inside linebacker. He's a good run-stopping player with experience, played 700-plus snaps last year. He's somebody they're very comfortable with on the field. Not like a game-changing player, but doesn't miss tackles. He's just a steady guy out there. And so, yeah, he's off the injury report. He's going to play. He did not play week 1. He was like a break glass in case of emergency guy, so they are getting him back.
All right, last thing for Ryan Dunleavy, New York Post, with us here on the Hoffman Show. I think both fan bases, Ryan, are looking at the opponent and going, this is a get-right game. Do you have a particularly strong feeling either way that one of the two fan bases here is actually correct on that there is any distinct advantage, or are we looking at two teams, maybe one that's heading towards a rebuild and one that's just started one, that are going to play a football game on Sunday and whatever happens, happens?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I mean, I'll probably end up picking the Giants because, like you said, they tend to have the Commanders' number, and I certainly think they're the more desperate team because Washington has some leeway starting a rebuild, and the Giants are trying to deny that they're in a rebuild. So they're certainly the more desperate team, but I would be very surprised if it's not the typical NFL fourth quarter one-score game, probably low scoring. The Commanders have the quarterback who could break loose and, run for a couple touchdowns, and I would say he's certainly the quarterback who's trending up in this game. The Giants' best chance to win the game is probably if their pass rush wreaks havoc on the offensive line of the Commanders. But Giants aren't going to win a score fest if Washington hits a couple big plays with Daniels or Robinson or Terry McLaurin, who Deonte Banks shut down pretty much twice last year as a rookie. So defense would be the path to the Giants winning the game. I think it'll probably be two pretty desperate teams and a one-score game in the fourth quarter. But I don't see a very obvious advantage either way.
It is funny you say that Banks shut McLaurin down because statistically, yes, I do feel like Terry very much feels like if I ever get a quarterback, I'm going to destroy you. Because some of the tape I don't think was as kind to Banks in terms of Terry beat him on a bunch of stuff and the quarterback play was abysmal. So that is definitely the matchup I'm circling for potential fireworks on Sunday is the Banks-McLaurin matchup. So should be a lot of fun. Ryan, appreciate your time here on the radio and probably see you in the press box on Sunday. Thanks, dude.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
That is Ryan Dunleavy, everybody. If you want more on the Giants side of things, you can read his work in the sports section of the New York Post. When we get back, a few more thoughts on this game before we focus our eyes on the rest of the NFL. We go around it, picks and analysis coming up at 5:30. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well, on the free Odyssey app. We'll go around the NFL in just a few minutes here. Get our picks, get the analysis, let you know what we think is going to go down this weekend. But real quick before we get to that, let's talk about what went down last night. Scary scene on the field in Miami. By the way, we did, Anthony, before we get serious, despite the fact that we said there's no way we're going to forget again to pick Thursday Night Football on the show. What do we do?
Mm-hmm. That's on me, Craig, because I told you I would remember. And I think I was just so excited for real things that I forgot.
Yeah, you sure did. That's okay, though. I'll forgive you. I forgive you. It's fine. You did, however, text me right as the game began. And for some reason, I've been thinking I was going to pick the Bills all day, and then you picked the Dolphins, and then I was looking at my phone, and I was like, who's home again? Right, it's in Miami. Let's go Dolphins. Bad idea, Craig. Terrible, bad
Horrible idea. Horrible.
Don't agree with Anthony. Trust your
Ever.
gut. Yeah.
Yeah.
Haven't we learned anything? But alas, things turned much more serious than a bad pick, unfortunately, last night on the field there in Tampa, as Tua Tagovailoa scrambled, took a shot, and he displayed that really scary, they call it like a fencing posture again, where his arm kind of goes straight and locks out for a second. Not nearly as long or as scary as the last time that it happened for him, but obviously repeat concussions are really terrifying. It is the scariest thing about a concussion. Like, one concussion can do permanent damage. Multiple concussions, now we're talking about really, really serious potential long-term consequences of traumatic brain injuries. And I don't really have a whole lot original to say here, other than this is yet another reminder of what this sport is. This sport is incredibly big, strong, powerful men violently running into each other. It is not a contact sport. It is a collision sport. It is a sport that has extraordinarily dangerous repercussions, but one that, frankly, the men that play it know the risks of at this point and choose to play, because the flip side of that is you can get generational wealth for your family, especially if you're playing the quarterback position. And for Tua, he's got that. Tua signed, what was it, $245 million contract or something like that this offseason. And now he obviously will not get all of that if he chooses to retire. If he's medically returned to play and then ultimately he decides to retire, he will give up some of that. But he's still got a ton of money as a signing bonus that he will get to keep a large part of. And I'm not exactly sure how all of the injury language works, but it's not like he made no money before that. Like, he's already made tens of millions of dollars, after taxes, probably still in the 8 figures, double-digit millions. But this is the risk. And for us as fans, like, it's a horrifying reminder that we're willing to watch all this and that we're willing to tolerate this risk. And not only that, when we're confronted with the risk, like, I don't know how many people turned off the game last night. It's like, no, you keep on watching because the game moves on. And that is the reality of this profession. That is I don't know what it says about us as a population, as a country that enjoys this. But at the end of the day, like, it's not like this was some dirty hit by Damar Hamlin. It's not like this was some, freak. It was a freak accident. He went to go wrap up as Tua dove, and Damar hit him in the head just right, and we see what happens. Luckily, he's able to walk back to the locker room. It's not like he was carted off and all that kind of stuff, which is fine. But this is the scary reality, and considering what we know about repeat concussions, I think it'd be really hard to have that conversation with Tua to say, like, hey man, might be time to go. Might be time to hang it up. For whatever it's worth, the 26-year-old on paper is signed through 2028. 4-year, $212 million contract was finalized in June. He can be released in 2026 with some dead cap money, yada, yada, yada. They could trade him, blah, blah, blah. The contract includes $167 million guaranteed, but the guarantees are mostly conditional. This is from CBS Sports. If he's never medically cleared to return to football, he can walk away with that entire package. But the Dolphins would be on the hook for $167 million, nearly 80% of the entire extension. Corey suspects that Joel Corey, former NFL agent, who's CBS's salary cap analyst, assumes that he'd be cleared by the NFL's concussion protocol. He would lose quite a bit. He would lose, probably about $90-something million. He got 93 guaranteed at signing, but if he's going to walk away voluntarily, the guarantees for next year void. So he got $50 million in guaranteed for 2025. That's probably gone. And part of his $42 million signing bonus is at risk because it gets prorated over the years of the contract. So basically 3/4 of the signing bonus he would have to return. So it's a huge financial decision, and it underscores the reality of this choice that Tua has to make. Risking being there for your family in the future or ensuring that they have wealth not just long after you're gone, but Tua, who's got kids at home, like probably after his kids are gone. And that's a tough choice to make. It's his to make. I appreciate Mike McDaniels saying, like, hey, this is Tua's decision to make. Let's not talk about this, and I'm certainly not going to chime in on it. But at the end of the day, man, I will say if I'm Mike McDaniel or I'm the Dolphins GM or their owner, I wouldn't feel great about putting him back out there because it feels like at that point it's on my hands. And certainly the medical staff in Miami has a huge decision to make in terms of being extra careful because repeat concussions are one thing over time, but man, consecutive concussions, if he were to suffer another one this year, the risk skyrockets if his brain, and that's what we're talking about here, is a brain injury. His brain is not fully healed. Okay, when we get back on the field, because that's how the game works, the games go on, we'll make our picks and give our analysis for week 2 next. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. My final show from this hotel room in Indianapolis, Anthony. I'm almost sad about it. I mean, I'll be back in for the Combine probably, but I do the shows from the convention center, on Radio Row. But I don't know, like maybe for old time's sake, I'm like, maybe on the first day I'm here, I just plug up and do a segment here, just for old time's sake. No, I'll probably go to Radio Row because that's where the people are.
Yeah,
I want to be where the people are. Nothing on that.
I wasn't sure if that was a song or not.
Yeah. So
I want to be.
Isn't that the Little Mermaid? Get your Disney
Maybe.
knowledge up.
Yeah,
hung out with my 3-year-old niece for 2 hours today, and look at me go.
Man, I'm not gonna lie. Those songs that they constantly listen to, very, very catchy. I love them.
I'm gonna say something out loud that's gonna cause people to be aghast, but I have never seen Frozen. But I'm intentionally. Wow, Anthony's face just went from laughing to like full seriousness.
You haven't seen?
I haven't
Frozen?
seen Frozen. I haven't seen Frozen 2. And what's the Moana? I haven't seen those 3 movies.
Moana is such a good movie too.
Well, that's the thing. I know, and if I did not plan on eventually having kids, I would watch them because they're just tremendous. Even though they're kids' movies, they're tremendous films. But I know that eventually, at some point in the future, God willing, if I have a child, I'm going to watch all of those movies 4,000 times.
Yeah. You're right. So you're more so just playing the slow game.
I'm playing the long game. Look, if my niece was like Uncle Craig, like if I'm at their place in Ohio and my niece is like, Uncle Craig, do you want to watch Frozen? I'd be like, I will watch Frozen with you.
Okay.
This is not anti any Disney kids movies of the 21st century. It is just a reality that eventually, if I'm living the dad life, that I will get my fill of Frozen, and then I will get my fill of Frozen 2, and then I will get my fill of Moana, and then we'll go back to Frozen, and then the kid will turn 2, and we'll repeat the whole thing again, because that's how it goes.
You got to get some cars in there.
Oh yeah,
some Finding Nemo.
Luckily, this is not me actually like announcing anything. This is not something I have to worry about soon. This is merely coincidence because I very sillily went. I want to be where the people are, and that's probably enough of that, Anthony. It is time now for us to make selections about NFL football games and provide analysis because we're smart people who provide analysis. Week 2, we're both 0-1 thanks to stupidly picking the Dolphins last night. Hey, we're smart people. We picked the Dolphins last night. Idiots. All right, let's see what we got as we fire up the old schedule for Week 2 in the NFL, a thing I had on one of my 1,000 tabs that were open, Anthony, and then can't find it. Okay, Giants Commanders will pick at the end of the show. Saints Cowboys. Dallas favored by 6 points. Both these teams come in at 1-0. Monster first outing for Derek Carr. Had a nice and tidy 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, and then was able to hand the ball off the rest of the game because they beat the Carolina Panthers by 37 points. Cowboys, of course, coming off a fairly dominant win of their own against the Cleveland Browns. Anthony Haney, this game at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. Who you got?
I'm going with them Cowboys.
How about them Cowboys?
I think every regular season, we see it. They go out, they have dominant regular seasons, and then they go to the playoffs and let everybody down. I think they're going to get after Derek Carr. I think this is going to be a blowout, to be honest. I think this is going to be a dominant performance. And I just don't believe the Saints, to be honest. I don't believe in those guys.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the Saints Week 1 scoreline was more about the Panthers than the Saints. I just don't know that it'll be a blowout. Like, the Saints are a perfectly mediocre football team, and if Derek Carr's healthy, then maybe they can get some stuff going where, like, it's a 28-21 game that the Cowboys, like, they have to sweat a little bit in the fourth quarter, but, like, nothing crazy. And look, 28-21 still a Dallas cover. I'm taking the Cowboys straight up. I don't know about a blowout, though. Like, I don't think the score – like, I think
two scores.
I think this game is closer than either of their Week 1 games.
Not
exactly a bold prediction, but –
yeah, I don't think it's going to be a 30-point blowout. I think it's going to be a two-score game kind of thing. I think Dallas is going to destroy these guys.
We'll see you on Sunday. All right, Lions and Buccaneers, rematch of the playoff game last year. Lions, of course, got the win. Bucs without 3 starters, including Antoine Winfield, also one of their starting offensive linemen, is out. This game is in Detroit, Anthony. I will unsurprisingly take Detroit at home. You have a juggernaut firing off, a Sunday Night Football win in overtime against a banged-up, I would say, contender in their division for sure, especially the way Atlanta looked week 1. But I'll take Detroit pretty comfortably here. I don't know that I'd take them to cover the 7.5 because that's a big number, but I do think that there's a chance that they with Winfield out, et cetera, that Detroit could run it up on Sunday.
Yeah, I think Detroit's going to take advantage of the Bucs secondary. Again, they were down to their 3rd and 4th string cornerbacks last weekend, and then you also tell me they don't have Antoine Winfield. I think the Lions are going to take advantage of them. And then also on the defensive side of the ball, they have a guy named Aiden Hutchinson. You can line them up any and everywhere, and they're banged up on the offensive line.
I believe it's the right tackle
well.
that's out, which is the side that Hutchinson normally lines up on. So
yeah, so it could get a little scary. I think the Lions, I think they cover, to be honest, if I was betting. But, I don't bet.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
A good thing.
Yeah, that's,
it is
that's a wise decision. It's a good way to not lose money. You can't lose money if you don't bet it. You can't win it either, but they don't air condition the desert because they lose. Colts and Packers. Wow, has the trajectory of this one changed? Malik Willis will start for Green Bay. It's at Green Bay, and yet the Colts are 3-point favorites after they played Houston really tough in the opener. As I sit here in Indianapolis, Indiana, could I possibly pick against the Colts? I could, but why would I? Malik Willis is starting at quarterback for the other team. I do think, Anthony, this game is probably closer than a lot of people are expecting. Like, that -3 line feels right to me. I just think LaFleur is an unbelievable coach. They obviously played really tough against Philly, and Philly might be really good. But Malik Willis ain't that good. And it really, honest to God, just has come down to the fact that Malik Willis ain't that good. And so I'm taking Indy on the road.
Yeah, I think we saw it yesterday, when Skylar Thompson came in for Tua. And as good as a coach as Mike McDaniel is, they could not get anything going. Like, it didn't matter what it was. So I think it's going to be a similar kind of game. I think the Colts go out here, really focus in on Josh Jacobs because, again, he can be a world beater. But I think if they limit him, that front seven that they have is very, very, very good. Even though they got cooked last weekend, they ran for 200 last week, the Texans. So I think if they limit Josh Jacobs, I think they'll handle them pretty good.
All right, are we all on the same page so far?
Yes, including yesterday.
Terrifying for me. Jets and Titans, 1 o'clock on CBS. Titans, of course, coming off their Week 1 loss in a game where they held Caleb Williams under 100 yards and still could not get it done because their quarterback was not good. And Will Levis, of course, Jets coming off the Monday Night Football against the Niners. I will say I'm a little scared for the Jets in this one because, one, they're coming off Sunday Night Football against the 49ers, or Monday Night Football. Short week, 49ers are super physical, and that's a tough turnaround. And they're on the road at Tennessee. But, so you got West Coast trip, and then it's not a short flight to Nashville, but it's not terrible, to start your week. Jets definitely didn't look super sharp offensively, but the idea of Will Levis against this Jets defense is enough to make me go, yeah, as much as fun as it is to troll the Jets, which is one of my favorite pastimes, I'm taking New York in this one.
You're going with the Jets?
So are you.
I am going with the Jets too.
Yeah.
But I think this game will be a lot closer than people anticipate just because the Titans defense really kept them in that game last week. They were balling until, Will Levis decided to give the game away. So I think the Titans, I think this is going to be a defensive showdown. And the Jets will probably squeak out with a 3-point win or something like that. It'll be close though.
It is a 3.5-point line, so that would have been a fun one for you to bet, but that's why you don't bet. Niners on the road in Minnesota. Tough place to play. You got to face Justin Jefferson, but they are still the San Francisco 49ers. Who you got in this one, Anthony? And actually breaking news in about 20 minutes ago. They'll have to do it without Christian McCaffrey again. He is out, and they are mulling whether to put him on IR with this calf and Achilles injury that he has, or he's been suffering from throughout camp and now into the regular season.
Yeah, I still think I'm going to go with the 49ers. Just what they were able to do. I think the system that they have is any running back's like favorite system, just because of the zone schemes they run, the line that he's running behind, the creativity Kyle uses. I'm going with the 49ers because the Vikings also will still be without Jordan Addison. I think that's a big piece.
Yeah, Addison out on the Minnesota side of things. I mean, here's the thing about the San Francisco offense last week. Dude, like, Ayuk had a bad game. Like, he had dropped a touchdown, a couple other routes that don't go his way, and they still put up 30 on a good Jets defense without Christian McCaffrey.
That's scary.
Yikes, bro. Brian Flores will try to light him up, but I think that could backfire. Yeah, I'll take the 49ers on the road. Seahawks and Patriots at Gillette. Seattle coming across 1 o'clock. I gave this game out on Wednesday as a Patriots plus 3.5 competition Wednesday pick. Take the home dog here. But straight up, I think I will take Seattle. Again, like, Seattle's low-key super talented. I know that the Patriots played really well week 1. I do think they have a formula that can win them some football games because their defense is legitimately good enough to keep them in a lot of them. And if they can just play complementary football, like, they'll mess around and win more games than they should. They're not actually dangerous, but you're going to have to beat them, which does give me pause for a team like Seattle that can be a bit boom or bust. But I think that they'll do what they need to do and get this done week 2 and get started 2-0 on their season.
Does no Kenneth Walker scare you at all for the Seahawks?
A little bit, but like, a running back is only going to move the needle so much for me.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to be a low-scoring, ugly game. And if Seattle can get, like, 2 explosive plays, if Lockett can get free for 1 and Smith and Jigba or DK can get free for 1, like, that might be enough.
Yeah, I think you've convinced me enough to go with the Seahawks. I was leaning the Patriots for some odd reason, but I think, I want to do right. I want to win some games this week. I want to pick the Seahawks to go out and get this W. They're the home team, right?
The Seahawks?
Yeah.
No, it's in New England.
It's in New England. Oh.
I know. This is a harder game to pick than you want. See, it's a West Coast team, 1 o'clock.
Ow. I'm going to stick with my guns. I'm going with the Seahawks.
Okay. All right. Anthony and I still on the same page through and
yeah,
through.
We are.
Are we going to 1, 2, 3 the Panthers all year?
Yes.
1, 2, 3 Chargers. Okay.
Chargers. I don't even know who they were playing. The Chargers.
Yeah, Chargers, Panthers. 1, 2, 3 Chargers. Okay. Browns and Jags. Jacksonville coming off that heartbreaking loss to Miami. The Browns coming off the just brutal performance by Deshaun Watson. Got picked off twice against Dallas, and that was the highlight of his week as he's been sued again for yet another accusation of sexual assault. I don't know why he is on the field this weekend. That is a disgrace the NFL can deal with later. Who do you have winning the football game, Anthony?
I think Deshaun Watson is definitely washed up considering what I saw last week. I'm going to go with the Jacksonville Jaguars, even though I really don't trust Trevor all that much. But I think them leaning on their run game was, pretty successful until Trevor Etienne fumbled. Travis. So I think I'm going to go with the Jags, and hopefully they can continue to, just lean on the run.
Yeah, no, I'm going Jacksonville as well at home. I think they're probably pretty ticked off after last week. I mean, I think the Browns are probably pretty ticked off too, but as a team mired in their own poop. And I don't know how they're going to get out of it. They should be rooting for the NFL to suspend Watson for this and have some kind of way to get out of his contract, because what a nightmare in every feasible capacity. Raiders and Ravens. This one in Baltimore. Ravens favored by 9. Of course, had that solid but not quite good enough performance in Week 1. They haven't played since 8 days ago already. It'll be a 10-day break for them between Week 1 and 2 after playing in the opener. Isaiah Likely, 9 catches, 111 yards in that opener, and the 1 touchdown pass that Lamar Jackson threw. I will take Baltimore on home turf here. Raiders have to come across country, trying to avoid no 2 start, but the Ravens are simply better, Anthony, and that's my analysis and why I'm picking them.
Yeah, it's not even close. I'm going with the Ravens as well. Aiden O'Connell struggled a little bit. No. What is his name?
Gardner Minshew?
Gardner Minshew. I said Aiden O'Connell. Yeah, Gardner Minshew didn't look all that good, and I don't expect him to do the same against the Ravens. So I think the Ravens are going to get after him. I'm going with the Ravens. And they're a part of my competition Wednesday. I think the Ravens won by double digits. Let's get it.
Oh.
Yes, sir.
Look at
Yes,
Anthony throwing off a little bit of a different vibe. Okay. Let's go to the Rams and Cardinals. Now we're in the 4 o'clock window. This is the 4:05 game on Fox. This is a stinky fish, Anthony. Arizona's favored by 1 at home. I know Puka Nakua's out. He's on IR. I think the Rams are the better team, but I'm going to hold my nose and take the Cardinals because the Cardinals being favored makes no sense other than them being at home and they played well in Week 1.
I think I'm going to go with this is stinky, Craig.
It makes no sense.
I think I'm going to go with the Rams, though.
I mean, that's the team that Vegas
Rams.
wants you to take, and it's the team that if I'm doing pure football analysis, I'm taking.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take the Rams.
Okay.
I'm going to go with the Rams.
I don't have good football analysis. This line stinks. That's why I'm taking the Cardinals.
I don't either.
Trout. Steelers and Broncos. Pittsburgh favored by 2.5 on the road at Mile High. You got Justin Fields versus Bo Nix, Anthony. This is what dreams are made of.
Loving it. But I'm thinking about TJ Watt here, and I think he's going to be the one to win this game. Him and Chris Boswell. I think Boswell goes out, kicks 5-6 more field goals. They get the job done. That's all you got to do.
TJ Watt and Chris Boswell winning the Steelers football games for years and years.
Yes.
I agree with you. Pittsburgh. Bengals and Chiefs. I mean, the Bengals looked all out of sorts in Week 1, losing to New England. Chiefs looked like Super Bowl champions ready to go. The big news out of Kansas City today is that Hollywood Brown needs surgery on his shoulder. They were hoping to avoid it. He's going to go on IR, no longer a week-to-week, but a months-long injury for him. But they were without him Week 1 and looked as good as they did. I'm comfortably taking Kansas City at home. Burrowhead is dead.
Burrowhead is dead. Yeah. No T. Higgins again this week. And I'm also tired of betting against Patrick Mahomes. When I do that, I don't think I've won a successful,
he doesn't
bet
lose very
him,
often, so that makes sense.
Well, there's that too. So I think I'm gonna go with the Chiefs here.
Seems like the prudent thing to do.
I think Joe Burrow is actually still hurt too. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely didn't look good. But also no T. Higgins, no Tyler Boyd as he left in free agency. Jamar missed all of camp. It's an offense that looked like they were
no Joe Mixon.
Yeah, they lost their bell cow running back. They had no running game last week. So, yeah, there's a lot of NFL analysts out there in national analyst land. That's what we should call it, national analyst land. National analyst land. They are selling their Bengals stock as quickly as they can. I don't know that I'm ready to fully jump off the Joe Burrow bandwagon. I think Zach Taylor's a really good coach, but that looked ugly in Week 1. All right, prime time, Sunday and Monday night. Sunday nighter, Bears and Texans. Houston's favored by 6.5 at home. I gave you Chicago on Competition Wednesday plus the 6.5. However, I do not think that they will win the game outright. I do think Caleb Williams will be a lot better. I know this is a really tough defensive challenge, as Week 1 was with Tennessee, but just he's too talented to be that bad again. I think that he does like the attention, the bright lights, in a way that's good. That's not a shot. It's like, oh, he's an attention seeker. No, he's a guy who doesn't mind a little bit of pressure. I think that, like Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, they're going to want to go out and have a better day. And that Chicago defense is legitimately good to be able to keep them in it. Obviously, we'll see if Jalen Johnson and company can have their way with Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins. But that's the problem. Like, Houston's got a lot of weapons. And I think ultimately Stroud and company will figure it out and be able to get off to a 2-0 start.
Yeah, I just think the Texans have too much firepower. And Caleb still needs time to develop, be a little bit more accurate. And I don't think the Texans defense gets enough credit for what's over there. So I'm going with the Texans here to go out here and beat up on Callaway.
Beat up on, he says. So you don't like my Chicago plus 6.5?
No.
Okay. We'll see what happens by next Wednesday.
Can't wait. Hey, look, I'm excited.
I'm excited for you to build your wheel, complete your arts and crafts project, and then have to.
Also.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I have the wheel over there. I want to make one. I want to make one change to my predictions.
Okay.
I think I'm gonna take the Browns over the Jaguars.
Okay. Take them. Have fun with that.
I'm gonna do that.
Okay. Mark it down. The record has been reflected. No. You beat the deadline because we got one more game to talk about, and it's the Battle of the Birds, Falcons and Eagles on Monday Night Football. The way Atlanta looked week 1 and the way Philly looked week 1, this could be a 1-2-3 game. But I have to imagine that the Falcons will look better as the season goes. But I do think that, like, I know I kind of hate when people do the internet doctor thing, and it's like, oh, Kirk can't push off. Look at him favor. But, like, it's pretty obvious right there on the freaking tape, man. Like, he does not look right. And, like, we crushed Atlanta for the Michael Penix pick. There is more than a part of me that is terrified that Atlanta's screw-up was the Cousins signing and that they got him in there and they were like, ruh-roh, this is not what we wanted. And, like, that's a bad job by them for not doing a good job on the medical stuff ahead of time or figuring out how to get more information or, being so desperate. But at the end of the day, dude, like, if they got Cousins in there and we're like, that Achilles is not right, like, he is whatever, and he can't push off and he can't drive the ball and all that, then drafting Penix was the right move, potentially. But you wasted hundreds of millions of dollars and, huge cap hits the next bunch of years. So it's not sound organization building, but it might have been making up for a do-over. It was 1 week. Kirk can still, continue to get strength back in that Achilles. He can still continue to get better. But that was a brutal start. I'm taking Philadelphia. Philly looked great in week 1 down in Brazil. Nice long week. Eagles, fairly easy pick Monday Night Football.
You had me thinking you were going to take the Falcons.
What part of that was encouraging for the Falcons?
None of it. I'm also going with the Eagles, too. I was so high on Kirk Cousins, the offense. I was so high on the Falcons' defense. And
I mean, the defense played great last week.
Yeah, the defense played solid, but still a lot of chunk plays that they gave up to George Pickens, who's a problem. And the Eagles have a lot more offensive weapons. So I'm thinking they're going to go out here and continue the good start that they had last week.
All right, those are our picks and some thoughts on each and every game, except for Commanders and Giants, which we dive back into next with our Friday edition of the Pick 6. The Pick 6, where we pick the 6 most intriguing players of the game on Friday. We'll check back in with them on Monday. Our Pick 6 is next on The Hoffman Show. 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Anthony, I cannot believe it's 6 o'clock already. I literally looked up at the corner of my laptop to see what time it was, and I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, I know the segment we just did. We did Around the NFL, which we do every Friday at 5:30. I'm in disbelief that it is 6 o'clock. This show has absolutely flown by.
Time flies when you're having fun, man. It is a football. I'm not going to lie. These Fridays be flying by, man. I don't know what it is. They flying, though.
They are flying. We got more analysis of the Commanders. How can their offense match up with this Giants defense? We'll talk about it coming up at 6:30. Take command style to wrap up our preview show. But what we do at 6 o'clock is a little thing we like to call the Pick Six.
The 6 biggest Commander storylines.
It is caught!
Delivered at 6 o'clock sharp. It's the Pick 6 at 6.
We set out to find a leader, someone who could take this franchise to the next level, build an elite team that consistently competes for championships.
All right, here's how this goes. Our Pick 6 on Fridays. Wednesdays and Thursdays, we give you the top headlines of the day. Fridays, we pick 6 players, 3 from me, 3 from Anthony, who we think are most interesting to watch on Sunday in preparation for the Commanders matchup. So who do we have our eyes on Sunday? And Anthony, I have a quick question for you. We used to do this slightly differently, where we would pick the 6 players we are most intrigued by in terms of like who's most important to the Commanders win. Now that we're doing most interesting players, should we also make opposing players eligible? Like, can I pick a Giant that I think will have a huge impact that I'm watching, and then we can talk about it from the Commanders' perspective of like who is responsible for stopping them potentially?
I like that. I'm not gonna. That's a nice little twist.
I don't know nothing. They didn't give me this job out of charity.
I
like
think
that
we can
twist
do that.
too. Okay, I like that twist too. We're gonna roll with it.
So can I do that as well?
That'd be really funny if I said no. I didn't. If I was just like, yeah, it's just me. No, of course you can. But I get to go first this week because you went first last week. So with that, Anthony, please tee up for me.
Number 1.
There we go. Number 1 is number 97. Number 97 in blue, and that is Dexter Lawrence. Dexter Lawrence is probably the best player on the field on Sunday. He is a monstrous nose tackle. It's really interesting. You'll hear Logan talk about this in Take Command coming up at 6:30. He is not... Like, he doesn't have some of the physical, like, freakish traits that, like, Warren Sapp had or even Vita Vea. Like, he just gets the job done. Like, he's brutally strong. He plays with a high motor. I would imagine if you're an offensive lineman, he's one of your least fun days at work all season long. And so it's going to take multiple people to deal with him. Obviously, it starts with Tyler Biadasz at center. Both guards are going to be a huge deal here. Cliff Kingsbury is going to have to make sure that their run game is aware of where he is, and you go from there. He is easier to block in terms of assignment than Vita Vea because Vea moved around a lot more. He's more of a penetrator. Lawrence is more of what Logan you'll hear him call a read player, where he can kind of just hold up and be like, okay, which way are you going? Now I'm going to take this 300-pound man, throw him out of the way, and go whichever way the play is going, versus Vea, who kind of forces the issue. Both are extremely difficult to play against because they both do their job really well, but they go about doing it differently. And so is there a way to take advantage of that? Is there a way to neutralize him? He's also an effective pass rusher. The perimeter run game feels like a good play. I also think there's some stuff schematically that will become really important. I'll get to that with my next guy. But I'm going to say the most important player that could, he's the guy that could wreck the game the most for the Commanders is Dexter Lawrence. So the first ever opposing player in a pick 6 is Big Sexy Dexy, 97 in blue.
I love the pick. And, Tom Brady, he usually says it's not necessarily the edge defenders that, give him the most problems. It's the push up the middle. And I think Sexy Dexy, he can do it all. He can stop the run. He can push the pocket. And then when you have edges on the outside, like Kayvon and Brian Burns, it just presents a huge problem. it's probably a good thing that they've resorted to just allowing the front four to, get pressure on the quarterback. But yeah, here's my number 2.
Number 2.
My number 2. So I'm not gonna go defensive tackle on the Giants. I'm gonna go defensive tackle on the Commanders, and I'm gonna go with Daron Payne. I think last week we saw a lot of missed opportunities. He had a chance at a sack. John Allen also had a chance at a sack, or 2. And I did some research, Craig. In the last 7
Anthony's
games,
coming with a research.
Hey, look
at this guy. Look at who is he?
A little something. Daniel Jones, he's been sacked in his last 7 games 35 times. And I think if we can, add to that, I think it's going to start with Daron Payne and John Allen. I think Daron Payne is going to have a little bit more of an advantage just because of how quick he is when it comes to, getting off his block. So I think Daron Payne is poised to have a big game against Daniel Jones. And I think this week they're just going to capitalize on all those missed opportunities they had last week.
I think that is a great pick. I think I've said this now for quite a while. I mean, going back to the summer, I mean, frankly, I said it last year too, especially when John was hurt. I think Daron Payne's been a better player for a couple of years at this point. And when we did our top 10 countdown of most important commanders this summer, I put Allen ahead of Payne because I think they can find ways to move Payne around and potentially create some matchups. Week 1, it didn't necessarily happen, and it might take a while for them to really experiment with it. Obviously last week it was Luvu and Armstrong and those guys on the edge, and I do think once Johnny Newton is back, which looks unlikely this weekend, Keim reporting that, and Dan Quinn was non-committal. I think when Newton comes back, it becomes easier to do this because you can have really good quality inside, not have a huge drop-off, and have Payne on the outside. But I wonder if eventually he lines up some at like defensive end. Imagine like Frankie Luvu, body type on one edge against the tackle, and then Daron Payne on another, and the next third down they switch. Like there's some funky stuff they could get to, but I think Payne is such a stud what he does, and I think that this Giants offensive line is a lot better, but there still are some spots inside that you could take advantage of, and I think Payne could play a huge role this weekend. I mean, they've had games where Allen, like, wasn't there a game they had like 9 sacks against the Giants not that long ago? Like, they've gotten after Daniel Jones quite a bit at times, and Jones has been able to beat them anyway with some big plays, if I'm thinking of the right game. So, because the Giants' offensive line was terrible last year. So, it's better, but I think Payne plays a huge role on Sunday.
Number 3.
So I mentioned I would get to some other interesting, ways to help in protection and some different personnel packages that I like for the Commanders with my next guy. My next guy is someone who I think is going to be a great player for this team, but was very quiet in his debut, and that is Ben Sinnott, tight end, number 82. Here's why I think that they could have this could be a big Ben Sinnott week, and I think Ertz, Sinnott, and Bates will be out there quite a bit. The Giants are banged up in the secondary. Some of their corners are banged up. But they are also banged up at linebacker, and Micah McFadden I don't think is going to play. So if the Giants, without their second-best inside linebacker, are going to be light at that position, you want to get them in heavier personnel with a backup linebacker out there. How do you do that? Multiple tight ends on the field. So with Ben Sinnott's versatility, you can be in 13 personnel and have Zach Ertz, or even 12 personnel with Ertz and Sinnott, no John Bates, 13, 3 tight ends, all 3 of them together. Now, definitely New York's going to probably match that in base, and now you've got a backup linebacker on the field. And even though he's a rookie, I'll take Ben Sinnott, or if you can get him matched up, Zach Ertz against a backup linebacker. Bobby Okereke is real good, but he's only one dude. And so I think using some heavier personnel is a really good way. And then, let's get on the perimeter. And if the Giants want to match that in nickel and dime, then, let's get our tight ends out there if I'm Cliff Kingsbury and have them crush defensive backs. And let's get on the edge and run a little bit with Jaden and obviously with the running backs. But let's run away from Dexter Lawrence. And if they're going to match that in base, well, now we feel good throwing out of that because we have Ertz and Sinnott that are good pass-catching tight ends. Bates has come on. That part of his game has grown a little bit over the past couple of years. He's not great, but if he's on their third best guy to cover a tight end, that's not necessarily not an advantage for Washington either. So I think that could be a huge personnel grouping for them this weekend, is using that 13 or even that 12, and Sinnott could be a bigger part of it. Also, like, hey, let's get a fullback in there and kind of, seal off an edge here if Dexter Lawrence gets any penetration. There's not a lot of plays where that probably is going to happen, but who knows? But yeah, I think Sinnott could have a bigger role this weekend than he did in his debut because of the Giants' injury situation and some of the personnel groupings that Cliff is going to want to use and his versatility. So Ben Sinnott, number 2 for me, number 3 overall in our pick 6.
Number 4.
Number 4, I'm sort of kind of torn, but I think I'm going to go with Noah Igbenogany / Michael Davis. I think these are the guys that are going to be filling in for Emmanuel Forbes. And I was really surprised that we didn't see any of Michael Davis last weekend. But I think based off, how long Emmanuel Forbes is going to have to be out, I think this is a good chance for us to, see what our cornerback depth is. And also, that is one of our weaknesses on the defensive side of the ball. So I just feel as though it's going to be important to, see how what technique and things of that sort are being taught to those guys to, combat what Daniel Jones is going to want to do. I think I read somewhere where his, yards to his target was 4.5 yards or something like that. So I think just being able to understand that and, see if those guys are coachable, I think is going to be huge.
Yeah, his ADOT was not very good in week 1, average depth of target. But he will, it was interesting watching the tape. There's definitely some big play hunting that Daniel Jones does, right? There's some design stuff that's a lot closer to the line of scrimmage that brings that number down. And then there's times that Jones will stand in the pocket and, hunt big plays. And sometimes he's taking sacks. And so you might be looking for a big play and get 0 yards depth of target credit for it because you get sacked. Or you have to throw the ball away at the last second. So I do think it's important to clarify that the results of his ADOT, his depth of target, were not very good, but it's not because they're not looking for explosives. Also, in a lot of the intermediate game, this is, when they do get some of these targets off, he's a tick slow. I think the corners in this game are really, really important because I think there's going to be, you're facing Daniel Jones. You're going to have possibilities of getting interceptions. This team did not create the turnovers that they wanted to in preseason / in training camp. They did not create a turnover in week 1. I do not think they win this football game without creating at least 1 turnover. Their opportunities are going to present themselves. Please take advantage of them. Which brings me to my last guy I want to mention, Anthony.
Number 5.
To wrap up the pick 6, and that is Quan Martin. Quan certainly could be a guy that has opportunities to make those plays. But last year, Quan played really well last year, and I think by the end of the year, right? Early season, not very good. He had way too much on his plate. That was a coaching failure, far more than it was a player failure. They simplified some stuff. They got him in one position. He played a lot better at the end of the year. He was playing fast. He was playing physical. He was grading out pretty well. And as long as, you didn't have him matched up against Tyreek Hill one-on-one in a terrible alignment, then he did all right. But there were some times last year in some of these games earlier in the season where Quan's issue wasn't necessarily I guess it was that inexperience and having too much on his plate, but it ultimately came down to communication, where he was involved in some of the blown coverages last year with Emmanuel Forbes, with some of the other guys, but the constant in some of those was Quan. And last week we saw it with Quan and Mike Sainer still. And that's not to say that all of these are Quan's fault. But as the safety here, as the guy in the middle of the defense doing a lot of communicating, he can help fix it. And I think that's a really important distinction. It might not be his fault. The rules might have said Mike Sainer still was supposed to go run with Jalen McMillan up the sideline, and he's the one that messed it up, not Quan. I don't know what their rules are. I don't know whose fault that was. But better communication means we never find out that there was a mistake made in the first place. There's mistakes made in football games all the time defensively that we never know about because they are covered with good communication. And so as the Giants will inevitably watch the Tampa tape and use some stacks, use some bunches, use some trips formations, use things with switch releases where they have routes running into each other, and they're going to require communication, especially on third downs in man-to-man situations for the Commanders. Can they finally break the streak of years where they have struggled with that kind of stuff? Think of all the teams that crush them with mesh concepts, just receivers running past each other in the middle of the field, dudes getting lost on third downs for years and years. Like the third down defense for years under Del Rio had similar bugaboos. I do not think this is the same defense. There is a lot of stuff on tape that is more nuanced than any fan cares about that suggests they're already better on a lot of fundamentals. But the big mistakes have been the same through 1 week. Quan Martin was at the center of a few of them. I would love to see him start to solidify the communication part of his game. As Joe Witt said yesterday, communication is not just about what's said, it's about what's received and acknowledged. So everyone's on the same page. Quan Martin, I think he gets a pick this weekend. I'm calling it. Calling a pick for Quan Martin. Go out and make a play. Quan, it's your time.
Let's get it, man.
Number 6.
Number 6, Craig. This one might surprise you, but I'm going with the kicker who we just signed this week.
That's a great call. I can't believe we haven't talked about the kicker more this week.
Austin Seibert. I think we're kicker fatigued, to be honest. Like there have been so many kickers that have come here, been here, for a couple of weeks, or a couple of games, and it's more so we got to figure out if this guy is our kicker for the short term, maybe the long term. But I think he's going to be important just because we saw how important K. York's missed field goals were last week. In terms of like how successful the offense is. So I think Austin Seibert, he has some some little shoes to fill, I guess, coming in here for his first game against the Giants.
And look, I think it's deeper than that too. Like, so Seibert's career, he's perfect under 40 yards. He does not have a big leg. And so over 40 yards, his percentage is really poor. He's only 2 for 6 career from 50. I think he's like 17 of 24 or something, 40 to 49. So it not only is it just like the obvious of like, hey, dude, do you make the kicks that you're sent out for? How does this affect the strategy? Like Dan Quinn was really conservative last week. 56-yarder for Cade York. Hey, he's got a big leg. Send him out there. Like those were situations, 47-yarder. You could have easily gone for it. It was like 4th and 3. 4th and relatively short, 4th and gettable in areas of the field where a lot of coaches are going for it. Obviously kick coverage. If you can't just say, hey, automatic, this is a touchback, if you decide you're at a point where you don't want to mess with a return, Austin Seibert can't guarantee you a touchback based off what his leg was. I think I read he hit a 52-yarder in the preseason with the Jets, so maybe he's been working on it, getting stronger as you go in your career. But he is not Joey Sly. He is not Cade York. He is not these guys that can just, Dustin Hopkins used to be able to do, just boom the ball through the end zone whenever told to. And so from a kick coverage standpoint, the potential for explosive plays there, although Gunnar Olszewski, the punt returner for the Giants, is out. I don't know if he was returning kicks for them too, but just a note. And 4th down decisions, when you're above 40-yard field goals, how does this affect it? That is definitely something to keep an eye on from a strategy standpoint on Sunday. All right, when we get back into the X's and the O's and the Dex's and the O's, why Dexter Lawrence is the key to the Giants' defense and how Cliff Kingsbury can plan around him. Logan dives into the tape. Take command preview to wrap us up here on the Hoffman Show. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And not only do I host this show, so I'm Craig Hoffman here. You probably guessed the whole Hoffman Show thing. But host a podcast with Logan Paulson. You probably know that by now. It's called Take Command. Logan, of course, 10 years in the NFL, including 6 here in Washington. One of the smartest dudes breaking down the game. And on Fridays, we're going to end the show with giving you some of his analysis. What does he see on this New York Giants defense? If you want the full breakdown of the Giants offense and kind of what we feel in general, bigger picture going into week 1, definitely check out Take Command wherever you get your pods this weekend. But for the defense, you don't have to go anywhere. Just keep listening right now. If you want to see really good personnel up front for the Giants, well, let me introduce you to Dexter Lawrence and his friends. The Giants defense is they've got some dudes on that side of the ball. Obviously, Kevin O'Connell and Justin Jefferson and crew did a great job last week to be able to handle it. They were able to neutralize what they needed to neutralize, get JJ the ball where they needed to. He got in the end zone. Everybody gritty. If you're ask you the same question, but now you're Cliff Kingsbury. What's the scouting report for this New York Giants team this week, and where does it start?
Yeah, for me, it starts with, obviously, Dexter Lawrence. We'll get to him in 1 second, but Shane Bowen is the new defensive coordinator there. So it feels so much different than it did last year. Last year, it's like the craziest, most unsound pressures, and you're just like, this guy, this can't be like a real thing we're seeing because they're just bringing everybody, and this guy's looping in the same gap, and just bombs over Baghdad. Comparatively, this is an extremely conservative defense. It feels very similar to like Bill Belichick from like 2005. You know what I mean? It's like, we're going to play quarters, we're going to play a little cover 2, we're going to play 6, we're going to match. And then much like Belichick, they are a little bit of a game plan team. So they're going to kind of say like, what do you do well? How do we take it away? And I think that's going to be a really interesting chess match between Cliff. Like, what is he like if I'm Cliff, I'm thinking, what does he know about us based on week 1? How do I prevent him from taking that away? Like Jaden's scrambling ability, like, are they going to change their rush path? Are they going to blitz more? Are they going to use a spy? Like, if I'm Shane Bowen after watching last week, I'm throwing in some of those pressures that they ran in Tampa Bay just to see if we got it locked up. You know what I mean? We had some free runners. We had some issues with some line stunts in terms of Wiley and Cosme on different levels. Like, let's throw that at them, see if they got it fixed. And so if I'm Cliff, I'm like, okay, how do we do that? What coverages gave us an issue? How do we beat man-to-man? Because we had a little bit of an issue. Jaden did in certain situations with that. So I would expect maybe a little bit more than last week, but I'd say at its core, the defense is a little bit simpler. Like, they're going to have a wrinkle for you, but on the whole, it's a little bit simpler. So I think that's advantageous for Jaden Daniels. Now, you mentioned the front, and like, Dexter Lawrence, I know he doesn't get talked about in the same way as like Chris Jones and Micah Parsons, but he statistically is one of the most dominant defensive players in the NFL over the last 3 years. And like, when you watch the game, you watch Minnesota's offense, like, he's creating sacks, he's creating TFLs, like, he just is able to do a lot. And when you look at his body type, it doesn't make a lot of sense because he's 6'5", he's 350. He doesn't move. He's not like lightning quick. He's just a bear. Like, I've never seen a guy consistently overpower offensive linemen the way he does and just push the pocket and create pressures. So to me, he's the problem. And I know people talk about Burns on the edge and Kayvon Thibodeau, and I think they're very good athletes, but they haven't, to me, lived up to the name just yet. Like, I know Kayvon Thibodeau had 10 sacks last year. I think 6 of them were against third-string offensive linemen, like just from different teams because of injury things over the course of the season. Against good players, he doesn't really show up. That's not to say he won't.
Yeah, he also, for whatever reason, had Charles Leno's number. Like, that was just a great matchup for him.
Like, he just had a good feel for it, for sure.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, Burns, like, is this guy that has this great reputation because LA was going to trade 2 first-round picks for him a couple years ago. He's got athletic pass rush juice. It doesn't always kind of lead to production. And I was talking to someone about that. It's like, how do you kind of weigh and scout those guys? And they were like, well, because of Dexter Lawrence, it changes their dynamic because Dexter's going to push the pocket. The quarterback's going to want to step back, and you're going to get a lot more sacks of those guys running high on the edge, which I didn't even think about. Because of that one guy in the middle's ability to disrupt. So I think that's something that I'm definitely going to be watching because Jaden, the one fumble that he had, you can say the first one, where he lateral fumble, whatever.
Right.
The one that he had like at the 40-yard line, he gets a little bit of pressure internally. He steps back in the pocket and the ball gets out. And I think like you got to be hyper aware because it's going to like that's how their pressure is going to feel almost every time. Pressure up the middle because he's really good, Dexter. And those guys are just racing to that spot. So don't step back. And how do we handle that if as a young player kind of dealing with different rush patterns?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I kind of noticed the more I watched last week back too is, and this was kind of his rep coming in. Biotish is really, really solid, but he's not the strongest guy in terms of moving people. And obviously trying to move Vita Vea is a task for that nobody can accomplish. And Dexter Lawrence, like that just sucks if you're Tyler Biotish. You sign with the Commanders, you're like, okay, cool. I'm excited. DQ was my guy in Dallas. All right, let's see what this schedule looks like. Cool. Weeks 1 and 2, I get Vita Vea and Dexter Lawrence.
Yeah.
What?
Two of the best like pure noses in the NFL.
You don't see many nose tackles, period. And then you get those two jokers back to back weeks 1 and 2. So what can Cliff and Bobby Johnson do to help Biotish out, not only in the pass rush situations, but also if one of the solutions is going to be to run the football to make sure they can get the movement that they need up front because Vea was able to kind of stunt some of that stuff last week just because he's so freaking big and hard to move.
Well, we'll say the one thing that I thought Tyler Biotish had a pretty good game. I'm not saying, I agree that like that's a tough matchup, but
it's not like he lost a ton. It's just like he's going to move people in a way later this year when it's not Vita Vea in a way that he was not able to move Vita Vea because Vita Vea is an actual mountain of a man.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying. I think I just wanted to point out so fans aren't thinking that he's playing bad, but
right.
It's like what I would say the thing about Tampa Bay that's tough is they're always moving around. Like in the front, they're always stunting. And the Giants don't, at least in the first game, and again, they might be like, oh, that was really successful. Let's stunt more, right? But at least based on what we saw week 1, they didn't stunt a lot. And so when you know kind of your landmarks and your targets, it's a little bit easier to overtake. And I will say this about Dexter Lawrence. The way he's playing the nose, like Vita Vea is a little bit more aggressive up the field, just a little bit. Dexter plays it pretty square, like he's like a true read player almost. And I think that, and it's surprising he's so effective as a pass rusher because you'd be like that shouldn't work, but because of that, he's not firing off the line of scrimmage. So usually that lets the center, especially a quick kind of not undersized center, but a quicker center like Biotish, get the snap off and get into him before he can really get going. So there's times like even though again Dexter Lawrence is one of the better defensive players in the NFL, where guys can sink double teams on him really well. They're not creating this great vertical movement, but they can sink the double team and at least get him off the spot in a way that you're not going to see with Vita Vea, because Vita Vea is going to stunt from the nose to the opposite A. He's going to stunt from the shade to the B. And he just, because of that movement, it makes it harder to really sink those doubles. So I think this matchup generally favors, but that type of stuff, those little details, also favor the Commanders as opposed to week 1, which was pretty tough.
Obviously, the weakest point, relatively speaking, of the Giants' defense is on the back end. How does Cliff take advantage of that, and what specific matchups do you like for Washington if they can get the protection and all the stuff up front? Right.
Yeah, well, I think the thing when you look at the depth chart for the Giants, and when you watch him play, I think Banks is a good player, good athlete, good physicality, but he's young. Nabin from Minnesota, the guy they drafted from Minnesota, rookie. He's a rookie starting safety. Yeah. No, Nubin. Yeah, thank you. So in the other corner starts with an F, Flott, something like that. Yeah. He also a young player. So they have again some of the same issues the Commanders have. They have in the back end. So what I would do is I would be like, how do we test your rules? Like, how do we make sure you're lining up correctly to a bunch, to a motion? Like, what's happening there? And I think when you watch the Minnesota game, you were talking about how how effectively that game was called by Minnesota's staff. Like, a lot of it is they're shifting, they're motioning, they're getting good matchups, they're hitting stuff on the move. And I think there's an element of that. So, I've talked about how Cliff in training camp had more motions, had more shifts. I think this would be a decent game. I'm not saying go shift motion crazy. It needs to be every play. But, in critical down and distance, like, let's see if you're paying attention. Let's see if you were paying attention in the install on Monday, or on Wednesday if you're the Giants secondary guys. And again, they have not played a lot of football together. So how do they communicate certain things? Like test those rules the way that Tampa Bay tested us week 1. So I agree. I think they've got some good athletes in the back end. I think the nickel player is a good player. The kid from Kentucky, they've got
Andrew Phillips.
They've got some good football players back there, but like they're young. So let's make them work for it a little bit and see what they know and test their communication skills a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting too. You talk about them not playing a lot of football together. I was just clicking through a couple of plays in NFL Pro, and they have who's on the field for each one, and like they even mixed up their corners last week. Like you got some Adoree Jackson, you got some Deontay Banks, you got some Cordell Flott, you got some Tyler Nubin, you got some Andrew Phillips. So like they had a bunch of guys go in and out of the game last week. So you talk about those reps together. There's only so much that they've stacked those through week 1 in a new defense, and can they take advantage? I was gonna say let's go a little bit deeper to wrap up here on some of the motion and that kind of stuff, because that's that becomes one of the big things. Like Terry lined up on the left 87% of the time. They only use motion so much. I do wonder sometimes when some of that stuff is auto populated, only because I felt like Cliff actually used a decent amount of motion, not like a ton. And it's not as intentional as like McDaniels, right? Like there's some of those like jet motions and those short motions right before the snap. Cliff's is more of like, hey, we're going to line up here. All right, jog across motion. Let's see if we can get a man zone read. Like it's a lot of information gathering. But I sorted NFL Pro. There's at least one mistake in your sorting mechanism, because it was like only 9 plays with motion. And then I was like, okay, let me go to the plays that don't have motion. And the first one I watched had motion. So I don't know what the actual percentages was, but I feel like there was a little bit more than maybe some of the numbers would suggest, based off of the fact that if it's being calculated off what I just described, then they missed at least one. But point being, Logan, that it was week 1. There is more in the bag. We have seen some like full formation shifts. We have seen some jet motions, and we didn't see any end arounds or jet sweeps last week either. That's certainly in based off what we saw in training camp as a possibility. So how, like, I guess the fan version of this question would be like, does Cliff need to do some of that stuff that guys like McDaniel and Shanahan and O'Connell are doing, or is he able to accomplish it through other methods, like some of the similar stuff that is more in line with how Cliff's like the identity of who Cliff is as an OC?
Yeah, so I think if you're calling or designing a play, you got to ask why you would motion. Don't just motion to motion. Like I think, when Scott Turner was here, like I think they were like the 3rd team in terms of motion usage in the NFL, the Commanders. It was something like insanely high. Maybe it was like top 10. And everyone's like, oh, that means it's a healthy offense. That's a sign of a good offense. But there wasn't that intentionality you were talking about, like with the motion. It was like, oh, we're going to bring this guy back. And it's like, why are we doing it? Like, what's the point? So I don't want to motion to motion, because motion does create convoluted looks, or it can create a lot of convoluted looks in the secondary. When it's a static picture, I know where everybody's at. So I think that's the thing. Is like, we talked about it last year with Sam Howell and Eric Bieniemy. It's like, maybe Sam doesn't want a motion. Maybe he has a hard time seeing it. And so if you're doing, like, why are you doing it? What's the motivation behind the motion? I think that's always what fans have to ask themselves. If it's just like when you watch Mike McDaniels, every motion is doing something, right? I'm going to motion out. You got to expand with me because you're backing up. That little out underneath is always there for you, right? Like whatever it is. I think you can do stuff formationally that'll give you similar results to motion. I personally think motion is very effective. Again, my background is in this like West Coast Kyle Shanahan. We're going to move around, test you guys all the time, but you can do stuff formationally from a personnel standpoint to test them too, right? So for example, if we put a running back, a receiver, and a tight end in a bunch, who is in the bunch now? Who's in the coverage? If we're playing man coverage, I probably have a linebacker, a safety, and a corner. But if we cross release, then we cannot just play straight man on that, because we're going to get picks. So, like, now I've got a running back on a corner, I've got a receiver on a linebacker, and a tight end on a safety again, or whatever, however that works out. And that's an advantage for us offensively. So I think there needs to be enough variety, like tight bunches, full splits, motions and shifts, to keep the defense unsettled. Like, what you don't want is a settled defense. And there are multiple different ways to do that. Like, even getting in 4-by-1, like Cliff did a couple times in the game, Like, that is not a conventional look, and you're going to have a lot of communication about where we need to go to like make sure we're matching that effectively, right? And not leaving this poor corner on the backside one-on-one. So I think there's a couple different things. Again, I think a little bit more motions probably in the future, maybe not this week, but definitely I'd say in the next 4 or 5 weeks, you'll see more motion from Cliff as Jaden Daniels gets more comfortable, as he gets a better feel for the defense. Because that's the other thing, is sometimes early in the season, you don't know what the defense's answer is versus motion, and you don't want to get them out of a good look because you're trying to motion, if that makes sense, right? Let's say
you line up, you get what you want, and now we've motioned and ruined it.
Yeah, or like we're motioning to the look we want, right? But they don't play it the same way, or it confuses the defender so bad that he's in the throwing window. You don't want that sometimes, right? Like, it's not always advantageous. So I think as Cliff gets more comfortable with the responses to motion, as he gets more comfortable with what Jaden knows, I think that'll increase. But I think in the meantime, you'll see stuff like personnel-wise, bunch full width stuff, overloads pre-snap, that'll be probably a staple. We're motioning to the look we want. Motion will probably sprinkle a little bit more. Right?
All right, if you want the full breakdown, including the other side of the ball when the Commanders are on defense and Daniel Jones is doing whatever Daniel Jones decides to do this weekend, you got to check out Take Command. Good news, it's available for you whenever you want. It's the beauty of a podcast. You can check it out right now if you want to go lock into that. If you want to wait till this weekend, whatever you got, check out Take Command wherever you get your pods, including on YouTube if you'd like to watch us at the Team 980. When we get back, we'll wrap up this here radio show and send you on your way into the weekend. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. It is Friday. We're looking forward to the weekend. And we're not going to forget to pick the Commanders game on the radio this time, Anthony. That is something we forgot to do last week.
Dang, we really forgot to pick the game last week.
I think so. I think we forgot to pick it at the end of the show. Or do we just do that with Thursday Night Football?
I think Thursday Night Football 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to try to not forget to pick the things that we pick. Look, early in the season, we're making adjustments. Yep. Maybe this is why I'm so understanding and give in to the actual, idea that, like, hey, it's week one, you have room to improve, all that kind of stuff, because I'm like, I hope that we improve week over week. We're getting back in our rhythms. There's some things we forgot how to do, like remember stuff.
Yep.
So there's that. All right, Anthony, Commanders, Giants. You want me to go first, or would you like to go first?
I would like you to go first.
Okay. I'm going to take the Washington Commanders because I think the New York Giants stink. I do not think they're a good football team. I think that realistically their front office knows they're only so good of a football team. They're building. Like, the New York Giants are essentially trying to do what the Texans did, which is we're going to build up other stuff so that when we get our quarterback, we're good. And they've got some good pieces, but, like, it's not going to look good until they get a quarterback who can operate. And they don't have that. Daniel Jones, even though he's been awesome in his career against the Commanders, like, he's not even that right now. He just looked so off in week one mentally. Like, I don't think he's got it right now. Is there a chance this is a get-right game? Of course. I don't think the Commanders are world beaters. They're not immune to any of it. But at the end of the day, I think they'll try to heat him up. I think some of the blitz packages will get home. And I think that the Commanders will win their home opener, get to 1-1 on the season, give Dan Quinn his first win as head coach of the Commanders.
Mr. Craig Hoffman.
Yes, sir.
I, too, am going with the Commanders.
Wow, we have a lot of similar picks this week.
I know. That's why I had to change, just one. I hope that one was the right one to change.
We'll see. You picked the Browns, bro. Probably not, but that's okay.
I know. But now I'm going with I'm going with the Commanders to win this one. Daniel Jones just doesn't look the same, and that's probably in large part due to the injury, but also from a processing situation. He hasn't always been that in the NFL. So I think he continues to live up to who he is as a person, and I think his streak against the Washington Commanders is over.
Something's got to give, as they say. He is 0-4 in his career against Dan Quinn. He is 5-1-1 in his career against Washington. Both offensive lines improved from last year. That's been kind of a huge defining point of this series the last couple of years. So we'll see ultimately, what happens on Sunday at Northwest Field. I will be there. Logan and I will have post-game coverage on Take Command, so you can watch that live on the Team 980's YouTube page, so make sure you're subscribed at the Team 980, or it will be in your podcast feed as soon as possible afterwards. So just subscribe to Take Command, and if you can't watch us live, you can consume it that way. So however it is that you ultimately want to intake the instant analysis, we will have it. And then, of course, we'll be back on Monday. 1st and 10 gets us started right at 4 o'clock. Monday shows are always really fun. They're more fun, obviously, if it's a victory Monday. But we get the job done, breaking down the game, whatever happens between the white lines, between the Commanders and Giants. Anthony, do we have a minute and 15 left in the show, or do we have an oddly timed break today?
Minute 15.
Okay, which is now a minute and 10, which means we have time for maybe a real thing, or we just can tell people what our favorite part of the show was today. Either one. I don't know. What's in the real things folder?
We have 3 things. We have a 30-second one if we want to play that one.
Go.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Said into real microphones.
The culture is actually damn good.
No time for context. Just play it, Anthony. Just go.
What? I cannot wait to watch Jaden Daniels play in the house for the first time of the year. 2! I'm doing this for Coach Quinn. I want Coach Quinn to get his first win, and I want that first win to come at home. 3! me. I cannot wait. See what this home field advantage looks, feels, and sounds like, fans. I'm putting it all on you. I'm out.
Who is that?
That was Fred Smoot.
Oh, I should have known. The mouth of the South. That's how we end the week. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you on Monday.